A stranger once handed you exactly what you needed at exactly the moment you needed it, and you called it luck. Maybe it was a car that broke down on a dark road, and someone pulled over who had no reason to stop. Maybe it was a stranger in a checkout line who quietly paid for your groceries when your card was declined. Maybe it was a voice at the right moment, a hand at the right door, a face you never saw again but never forgot. You thanked them, you moved on, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you filed it away as coincidence. But what if it wasn't coincidence at all? What if some of the strangers who have helped you were never really strangers to God? We live in a culture that has trained us to explain away every good thing with logic. We say it was luck. We say it was timing. We say the universe worked in our favor, as if the universe were a force with intentions of its own. But Scripture tells a very different story, one where nothing that happens to a child of God is left to chance, and where the hands that help you are sometimes borrowed by heaven for a purpose you were never meant to fully understand in the moment. Today we are going to look at 5 biblical reasons why strangers show up in your life exactly when you need them, and by the end of this video, you may never look at a random act of kindness the same way again. You may start to wonder how many of the people who crossed your path for only a few minutes were actually sent, not stumbled upon. Hebrews 13:2 gives us the foundation for everything we are about to unpack. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Read that verse slowly. It does not say angels announced themselves with wings and light. It says people showed hospitality to angels without knowing it, which means somewhere in Scripture, ordinary human kindness was actually a divine encounter, and the person receiving it had no idea. Reason 1, God sometimes sends provision through people who owe you nothing. This is the reason that should humble every single one of us, because it removes the illusion that we are entitled to help. A stranger who owes you nothing has no obligation, no history, no relationship to protect, and yet they stop. I think of the story of Elijah in 1 Kings 17, sent by God to a widow in Zarephath, a woman who had never met him, who had barely enough flour and oil to feed her own son one last meal. God did not send Elijah to someone who owed him a favor. He sent him to a stranger who had nothing to give and everything to lose. And through that stranger, Elijah was fed for months. Sometimes God bypasses the people who are supposed to help you, the people with history and obligation, and instead moves through someone who has absolutely no reason to care, specifically so that you cannot credit human logic for your provision. When help comes from someone with nothing to gain, that is not chance. That is a signature. Think about how easy it would have been for the widow of Zarephath to say no. She was not wealthy. She was not comfortable. She had already resigned herself to death, telling Elijah plainly that she had only enough for one final meal for herself and her son. By every human calculation, she had every reason to protect what little she had left. And yet something moved her to share it with a stranger who showed up unannounced at her door. That is the pattern to pay attention to. God rarely announces provision loudly. He usually slips it through someone's willingness to give when giving made no logical sense. If you have ever received help from someone who genuinely had less than you did, someone who gave anyway, that was not simply generosity. That was heaven working through scarcity to teach both of you something about faith. Reason 2, God uses strangers to remind you that you are not forgotten. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from feeling invisible, from wondering if anyone actually sees you or your struggle. I remember a season in my own life where I felt completely unseen, going through something painful that no one around me seemed to notice. And then, on an ordinary afternoon, a stranger at a coffee shop said something so specific to what I was carrying that I nearly dropped my cup. She did not know my name. She did not know my story. But her words landed like they had been written for me specifically. Psalm 68 verse 6 tells us that God is a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows, and he sets the lonely in families. Sometimes the family God sends is not blood. It is a stranger who becomes the reminder that heaven has not stopped watching you, even when the people closest to you have. I have talked to so many believers who describe the exact same experience in different words. A message from someone they barely knew, arriving on the one night they had considered giving up. A conversation with a person on a plane that felt strangely, impossibly relevant to a decision they were wrestling with in private. None of it makes sense if you believe the world is random. All of it makes sense if you believe that God knows exactly where you are sitting, exactly what you are carrying, and exactly who He can send to remind you that you have not slipped through the cracks. Loneliness convinces you that no one notices. A single well-timed stranger can dismantle that lie in less than a minute. Reason 3. God tests and blesses hospitality on both sides of the encounter. This one is easy to overlook because we usually think of the stranger as the one doing the blessing. But the encounter is often a test for both people involved. Genesis 18 tells the story of Abraham, who welcomed 3 visitors under the oaks of Mamre without knowing they were messengers of God. Abraham was not looking for a spiritual experience that day. He was simply practicing hospitality the way he always did, offering food and rest to travelers passing through. And because he was faithful in an ordinary act of kindness, he received news that would change the course of his family forever. Sometimes when a stranger helps you, it is not only a blessing for you, it is also a test that stranger passed, one that most people fail because they were too busy, too rushed, or too suspicious to stop. If this message is already reminding you of a moment you brushed off as random, brother, sister, please subscribe to this channel and write in the comments, "Lord, open my eyes to your messengers." Now let us continue, because the next 2 reasons are the ones most believers never consider. Reason 4. God interrupts your isolation through people you will never see again. There is something almost mathematically strange about the strangers who help us the most. Often we never see them again. They appear for a single moment, do something meaningful, and then vanish completely from our lives, never to cross our path a second time. I think about the man who once helped me change a flat tire on the side of a highway in the rain, refusing any payment, telling me only that someone had once done the same for him. I never learned his name. I never saw him again. And yet that 15-minute encounter stayed with me for years. Luke's gospel gives us the story of the road to Emmaus, where 2 disciples walked for miles with a stranger who explained scripture to them in a way that set their hearts on fire, and only after he vanished did they realize who he truly was. Some people are placed in your life for the length of a single conversation, a single ride, a single moment of help, precisely because their assignment was never to stay. Their assignment was simply to intervene and then disappear, exactly like the one they were sent to represent. We often measure the importance of a relationship by its length. We assume the people who matter most are the ones who stay in our lives the longest. But Scripture keeps introducing us to encounters that mattered enormously and lasted only minutes. The disciples on the road to Emmaus did not need a lifelong friendship with that stranger. They needed one conversation, delivered at exactly the right moment, to reignite a hope that had nearly gone out. Maybe some of the strangers in your story were never meant to become part of your life. They were only ever meant to become part of your turning point, and once that turning point was reached, their part was finished. Reason 5, and this is the reason most people never see coming: God is training you to become that stranger for someone else. Every time a stranger helps you without asking for anything in return, you are not just receiving a gift. You are watching a pattern that God intends for you to repeat. Matthew 25 puts it plainly: when the righteous ask the Lord when they fed him, clothed him, or welcomed him as a stranger, he answers that whatever they did for the least of these, they did for him. The kindness you receive from strangers is not meant to end with gratitude. It is meant to end with imitation. God does not want you to simply remember the stranger who helped you on your worst day. He wants you to become that stranger for someone else on theirs. The chain was never meant to stop with you. You were meant to be a link, not a dead end. This is where the story shifts from something that happened to you into something that is required of you. It is easy to be moved by the memory of a stranger's kindness. It is much harder to become inconvenienced by someone else's need the way that stranger once let themselves be inconvenienced by yours. But that is exactly the standard Scripture sets. Not admiration for kindness observed, but participation in kindness extended. Every act of unexplainable help you have ever received was, in a very real sense, training. God was showing you what obedience looks like in action, long before He ever asked you to perform it yourself. Here is what should unsettle you a little, in the best possible way. If strangers have been agents of God in your life more often than you realized, then it is entirely possible that you have been one too without ever knowing it. That moment you stopped for someone on the side of the road. That time you covered a bill for someone you had never met. That small kindness you nearly talked yourself out of doing because you were tired or in a hurry. You may have been someone's answered prayer and never even known it. 1 Peter 4:10 says it clearly. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others, as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Notice it does not say serve people you know. It says serve others without qualification, without exception, without requiring a relationship first. So the next time a stranger helps you in a way that feels just a little too perfectly timed, do not brush it off as coincidence so quickly. And the next time you feel the smallest nudge to help someone you have never met and will likely never see again, do not ignore it either. You might be standing exactly where an angel once stood, without knowing it. If this message has changed the way you see the strangers in your story, I want you to do one thing right now. Write in the comments, "Lord, let me see your hand in every stranger." That declaration matters, and God takes it seriously. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, someone who has forgotten that heaven is still moving through ordinary people, share this video with them right now. Do not forget to subscribe to Bible Truth Message so we can keep growing together in biblical wisdom every single week. God bless you deeply, my brother, my sister. Until next time.